Hello and welcome to Nerdarchy for Nerds by Nerds. I'm Nerdist Dave, and today I am joined by Jacob Darkinson. How are you doing today?
I'm well. How are you doing? Thanks for having me, Dave.
I am doing great. If you'd be so kind of introduce yourself and tell people a little bit about you.
Yeah, absolutely. Jake Dirksen. I am an archaeologist from Ohio, Cincinnati, Dayton area. Been gaming for a little over 10 years as both a gamer and a DM. Been kind of learning and growing a lot over that time. And just recently, I figured I'd put all of my various enthusiasms and acquired knowledge to use by creating this game, Heroes of Tara, which is a fifth edition adaptation dedicated entirely to bringing to life the world of ancient Irish mythology. Literally based in Ireland as we know it, about a turn of the first millennium, Iron Age, only all of the mythology is real. All of the heroes that you might know, Finn McCool, etc., they're running around, and your characters are just as epic and heroic. This game is all about bringing to life, as I say, that setting and making the players feel like they're larger than life and being part of the mythology.
As always, folks, the links will be down in the description so you can go check them out. The Heroes of Tara is on Kickstarter now. Is already funded. Is doing really well. Uh, and I didn't know you were an archaeologist as well. You didn't even mention that before. How am I supposed to talk about your Kickstarter when you're dropping that?
Yeah, burying the lead a little bit, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah. I've been in the field for, gosh, maybe 4 or 5 years now. Was very fortunate to kind of hit the ground running out of college. Even a bit of a family business, you might say. No nepotism involved, but I'm following in my father's footsteps. He was also a archaeologist, and what we do is called cultural resource management. It's not so much like the academic university museum funded kind of Indiana Jones sort of thing. It's more it's all under the auspices of this federal regulation called the Preservation of American Antiquities Act. And before any big industrial or corporate development or construction project goes, they have to hire independent contractors like myself to go ahead, kind of survey the area. If we find anything, we excavate it, catalog it, get it out of the way, so it's not just bulldozed right through. So I've been doing that for a while in just kind of my backyard here, the Midwest area, specializing in colonial and pre-colonial sites. Uh, but my field school was on a fort on Hadrian's Wall in northern England, the ancient Roman Empire, and that was absolutely mind blowing. We were pulling up swords and signet rings and statues just about every other day. It was amazing, and even before all that professionally, I've just always had this obsession with the ancient world. Yeah, so it's all
So
coming together.
I think that makes you unusually qualified to put forth a product on ancient cultures and things from the past. You're already a trained researcher in that. Is it hard for you to shift from like what you're focused on now to a different culture?
Uh, well, not necessarily, because I've always really just had an appreciation for cultures all over the world. I really have no exception to what catches my interest. I'll go from culture to culture, time period to time period, just whatever I might be wanting to learn about that day. I happen to allow myself to learn a lot about colonial, pre-colonial, Midwestern history just through my work, but in my free time, I guess you can say the rest is a hobby. And Ireland and Irish history and mythology has just always been a particular interest, I suppose you could say, a bit of a guiding star. Not out of any personal heritage. I am just kind of your typical, American mix of every which way. But it was the music that really grabbed my attention. If you know the Pogues, just this amazing folk-inspired punk band headed by Shane McGowan. They blew my mind when I discovered them when I was a kid, and more traditional folk Irish music as well, like the session group, the Chieftains. This stuff has just always been, what I go to for invigoration and inspiration. So the music that I love just kind of would always pull me back to the land of its origin. And I also want to say, yeah, I just by personal interest and being lucky enough to pursue the career of an archaeologist, I am equipped in many ways, I feel, to address this, but I want to just make it very clear that my guiding principle is just this earnest appreciation for it, and that is tempered by, the tricks and skills that I picked up in my college education. But by no means am I a scholar. I I'm very proud to say I'm an archaeologist, but many times that honestly just amounts more to just kind of digging hole after hole in the field, in a cornfield, and not finding anything. Uh, like the getting down into the records and finding out these secrets and whatnot, that's a little bit above my pay grade. So I want to be as transparent as possible about that.
So does that make you like the laborer for scholars?
Yeah, kind of. We usually have like, one guy with a master's degree heading up the team, and the rest of us, we're wearing. Honestly, if you look at us in the field, there's not much to tell us apart from your typical construction worker. We have to wear these hard hats. We have high vis safety vests on. We're actually paid worse than your typical highway construction worker, and I should know I've worked that job too. There was a time where I got out of archaeology, but it always has a way of pulling you back in. The life is you got to be very unique to live the life. You live on the road a lot. You're living out of hotels. It's a freelance contracting gig economy. Like I said, I'm not with a museum or university or anything. It's all under the auspices of like these contracting firms that specialize in gathering freelancers like myself. And these archaeology companies are themselves the ones that the federal government requires the development corporations to hire out. And so it's just kind of this, typical it's honestly a bit of a corporate hierarchy that kind of sucks the fun out of a lot of it. That's
Yeah.
cultural resource management. I wish it was a lot more academic sometimes, a lot more for the sake of discovery itself. But more often than not, it's the folks who are paying us are just kind of like, you're only out here because the government tells us you got to be here. So chop, chop, chop. We got something that we got a pipeline to lay down. Though, thankfully, I'm very happy to say we've been taking less and less pipeline work in recent years, and it's been more and more solar and wind farms, which is encouraging.
It feels like a step in the right direction.
Yeah, yeah. So even if we are kind of working for companies that I am certainly not always on board with, I like to think that we're a bit more of a mitigating factor. We're
Yeah.
a regulating influence that try to preserve these things and protect our cultural heritage from the worst depredations of you know bulldozing and such and such. You know how it goes.
I do, unfortunately. So, what was the inspiration for Heroes of Tara?
That goes back way in my gaming history, actually. Every DM has their baby DM's first steps story, where they took their first swing at maybe a campaign or something, and it's always over ambitious, always chaotic, and always falls apart after a few sessions. And that was me. For me, it was a Celtic campaign that it was, because I was obsessed about this stuff even back in like high school, early college when I started. And to this day, it's fondly remembered by my gaming group. I'm very fortunate to have had a steady in-person gaming group this whole time. And back then I had this idea of like, oh man, we just found this awesome new thing called D&D. I really love all of this mythology and stuff. How about we just immediately mash them together and see what happens? And I had this, over ambitious, really poorly prepared attempt going on. The players had a great time because it was just absolute chaos, but it was quickly abandoned and we moved on to other things. But I guess when I started writing this again, like 2 years ago, I was thinking, what if I took another swing at that same concept, but now with the 10 years of experience I've gained since then? I've been, not only have I, been to college and gotten these little academic chops and whatnot, I've also, learned as a DM, learned as a player, figured out the ins and outs of the game itself. So I started a little over 2 years ago writing Heroes of Tara, wanting to, with just the core idea being, bringing to life Irish mythology, not just making my own game setting that was like, inspired by or loosely based on, like translating and simulating the actual source material as best I can onto the game table. And my previous first attempt was, it included all of the British Isles. It was not only Irish culture, it was also Welsh culture and, early pre-Roman Brythonic culture, and it had the Picts and even some Gaulish stuff. And I was just mashing that all together, and it didn't work. I was even trying to get King Arthur in there because he's loosely Celtic in many of his inspirations. But with this one, I was like, okay, let's, with the clean slate, let's narrow down the focus, make it far more practical, far more achievable, focus on Ireland. And that really helped because of most of these Celtic cultures and bodies of myth and stories and folklore. The Irish canon of folklore is perhaps the largest and most complete. The only competitor would be the Mabinogion from the Welsh folklore tradition, but that's also based far later in like kind of Christianized medieval contexts. It's also a lot more compact. It's really just one, a collected work, all one book. The Mabinogion is, but with Irish mythology, you just have this sprawling source material and rabbit holes that go down in every which direction, and it just quickly took off from there. After I started kind of scratching at the surface, I would discover these threads that I could follow to I was like, oh my God, this could be a whole class. Oh my God, this could be another class, and just, oh man, I got these, and I have this whole thing for other special campaign mechanics over here that are, it was just amazing. The source material kept revealing itself to me in this way that it just seemed to naturally lend itself to creating this amazing deep setting here, because honestly, when I started out, I didn't know how far it would go. I didn't really have big ambitions, but it just kept going. And before you know it, now the demo PDF that we have out, without even illustrations or proper layout to stretch it further, is 240 pages. So obviously we've had no shortage of source material to work with.
Nice. It's going. Now, I thought my first D&D character was a druid, and I thought I worshipped a Celtic god, but I'm doing some Google searches, and apparently maybe not. Sylvanus, I thought he was Celtic, but no? And did you freeze on me, Jacob? You did freeze. We'll see if Jacob unfreezes or comes back in a moment here, or if the internet is just being fickle.
Okay, you're back. Am I back?
You are back.
Yeah, sorry about that. Yeah,
No worries.
last I heard on your end was the Celtic god that your first druid character worshipped.
Yeah, so I thought it was Celtic anyway. Sylvanus?
Sylvanus, or Sylvanus. I probably want to say Sylvanus, but I guess my reflex is to shy away from that because it's just been so thoroughly colonized by the Blizzard character.
Yeah. But, I just noticed that with a quick Google search. It's been obliterated.
Yeah, but no, I believe no, that was originally a Celtic deity, Gaulish, I believe. I don't think they made it up into the Irish pantheon, but as far as I know, Sylvanus, after Gaul was conquered by the Romans, got, kind of adopted and assimilated by Roman cults, as the Roman Empire was so apt to do. But yeah, no, yeah, I'd say you were right on the money with that one.
Well, so what edition did you start with?
We started with 4th, but that did not stick very long. We very quickly fell back into 3.5.
Yeah, so like in 1st and 2nd, they had the deities and demigods books, which I don't know if they did one for 3rd. I mean, I feel like they did everything in 3rd. But it had all the gods broken down by their different pantheons and statted out. Let's see. And you are freezing again. Nope, you're back.
You broke up there again a little bit. Yeah, I'm sorry about that. I'm willing to bet the connection is on my end, but let's see if it'll hold up. But from context, I didn't hear everything you're saying, but were you referring to the Celtic Guide from second edition?
Well, no, so there was a Celtic Guide from second edition, but also,
Yeah.
no, I was just saying first and second edition. I don't know if they did it in third, but they
Oh,
had
right.
the deities and demigods books,
Right.
and and it had like all the different pantheons broken up by their mythologies and
Yeah,
and
exactly.
statted out, of course. Which I don't know. I don't think we'll ever see something like that in fifth edition. Hmm.
Okay,
Uh,
I'm back. I'm so sorry about whatever is going on with this
that's so
connection.
weird. We were like chatting for a half an hour, pretty
Yeah, it
much,
was
with no
crystal
problems.
clear. Perfect. Isn't that just the way it goes?
Yeah,
Uh,
the internet gods can be fickle.
Indeed. But we're certainly giving some gods some good credit here by talking about them. But yeah, the those guides in those first editions were always super handy, especially when they were kind of fleshing out their own pantheons. But it's like, yeah, even to up to fifth edition, Ogma has stuck around as part of the Forgotten Realms pantheon, and they're actually from the Irish mythology. Ogma is. I believe in Forgotten Realms, they're the deity of knowledge and eloquence. In the original Irish mythology, it's much the same thing. They're the ones who they're the god who invented writing. Uh, they're a member of the Tua De Danann. The Tua De Danann is actually kind of like the collective term for like the Irish pantheon in
Yeah,
particular.
it's been so weird as far as what gods have made it into the Forgotten Realms, where they just kind of grab a couple um, real world and then mix them in with a bunch of non-real world gods. Because I know we have Tyr and Agma, and I really don't know if any of the other ones are also real world deities or not.
Uh, yeah. As far as I think then, like, if you want to really get into like the nitty gritty of Forgotten Realms, I think they have this whole.
All right, so it's going to be an interesting ride, folks. As Jacob kind of
Yeah.
like pops in and out with the internet, it would appear, and the freezing. When he comes back, I'll see if we can't kill maybe the video and see if that helps to stabilize his internet. Who knows? Or maybe everyone's attacked his Wi-Fi all at once.
All right. Can you hear me?
I can.
Okay. My computer just completely disconnected from Wi-Fi, then reconnected.
Oh.
So it's obviously my end that is acting up. I really apologize for that. This is pretty bad, but
We're
let's
doing it
see if the whole
live, my friend.
reconnection thing. Yep, yep.
It happens. I was going to say maybe try killing your video feed, but if your computer is actually disconnecting and reconnecting the Wi-Fi, I don't know that that'll help.
Honestly, let's just try stopping the video. I'm just gonna try and stop the video to see if that does at least something.
Yeah, yeah.
It might. Every little bit counts. But
Sure thing. It's so
yeah,
weird though. It's so fickle because it's like I said, we were talking for about 40 minutes. No problem.
absolutely, yeah. It's I should probably work on getting one of those little I don't have the router in my room here. I need to get a little Nexus point. Anyways, while we have connection, time is precious, I
Yeah.
suppose.
Uh,
I'm still here, but
I'm
I'm
laughing
not
at one
quite
of the
sure of
comments
exactly.
in the chat.
Oh,
They're disparaging a particular internet cable company.
they would be correct on that one. Yeah, they have my number.
Yeah, yeah.
That's indeed the culprit here. But So I'll need you to kind of get us back on track here, as I kind of lost lost the thread of where our conversation was at. We were talking about
No
these
worries.
various editions.
So actually, I'm going to move in a different direction anyway.
Sure.
What is the like biggest appeal to you, and you think might be like really useful for folks about adding Celtic mythology and myths to their games?
Well, I think it really brings something special to the table that is kind of ironically or paradoxically the same reason that not many people have had such a complete introduction to it. So, everybody knows the Greek mythology and the Norse mythology, right? Everybody knows Odin and Zeus and Thor and Hercules. We've had comic books and video games and movies galore for decades now. But, everybody is always kind of aware of Irish mythology off on the periphery there. Maybe they know one or two characters or something, but it's usually seems so impenetrable, certainly because at least pop culture has not kind of built these inroads for people to be introduced to it, to gain an interest and start their own research and stuff. It's a lot of people don't know where to start. So even beyond gaming, if somebody just wants to take this book and like have it as kind of like this collected condensed source of just everything Irish mythology, has as like this signpost and landmark of that organizes everything and makes it at least a little bit more understandable and quantifiable. uh, they could take this book just for that. But in terms of gameplay, what would make this interesting for players to experience and the setting to explore, uh, it's quite unlike any of these other mythologies. Norse mythology, Greek mythology. Like I said, paradoxically, Irish mythology's most defining trait is probably its ineffability. Its abstract quality. It's so difficult to get your grasp on it because it's just time and distance and all of these things that actually are given some consideration, even in other mythologies, are just so irrelevant in Irish mythology. And I don't want to make it sound like Irish mythology is so exceptional. Obviously, mythologies around the world have these qualities of magic, surrealism, and otherworldliness to them. Otherwise, they wouldn't be mythologies. But I think that once people start exploring it, they will come to see what I mean, where there really is something a little extra and weird about Irish mythology. I'm really fond of quoting J.R.R. Tolkien, like the big man himself, uh, because he was a mythologist, and he once gave his opinion on Irish mythology in one of his many letters, and he was saying that he just couldn't come to terms with it because it was mad. He called it mad. He described it as like the stories are bright and colorful, but they have absolutely no order or reason to them. They are like a stained glass window that's been broken and reassembled without design, is how he described it, which I think is so poetic.
What would be like a good example of that?
Oh, oh man. So here's a good one. Uh, well, the problem that I'm having right now is that there are so many good ones. I'm trying to find like a perfect example. So let's take the Irish mythology spin on the typical trope of slaying a monster. How that goes about. Oftentimes it can be Thor slaying a giant with his hammer, Zeus slaying a titan with his lightning bolt, Saint George taking down a dragon with his lance. Pretty simple A to B stuff, just like in any other D&D game. You can kind of boil down a lot of these mythologies to the monster being a bag of hit points that the hero just has to smack until it's dead. Fair enough. But when you get into Irish mythology, here's one story of a king who was named Angus and was a king of Ulster. One day, he's sleeping out by the side of a lake, and he wakes up and he finds that he's being kidnapped by the fairy people, leprechauns, little folk. They're about to drag him down into one of their hills and kidnap him, but he turns the tables on them, catches one of them, and in return for their freedom, they gift him with these shoes that allow him to walk on top of water and also descend below the surface of the water and breathe freely. So he can just opens up this whole new world to him because the surface of the water in Irish mythology is very much a literal portal to the other world. So if he can descend below the water and walk upon the bottom of a lake as if it were dry land, he is suddenly opening up this entire new fantastic world below the waves to him. And he pretty soon plumbs the depths of every body of water in Ireland. But the fairy people tell him there's this one lake that he cannot go into, that he just better not go into. And of course, being told they can't, he does. He goes down there, and what he finds is this monster, the Muirdris, it's called. And an interesting thing about Irish mythology is, in one of its abstractions, is that it is usually very sparing on its descriptions of these creatures. You know, most modern texts interpret the Muirdris as being like, oh, obviously that's just like a sea serpent or a dragon, yada, yada, yada. Interesting thing is Irish mythology actually doesn't have dragons. It's actually bereft a lot of these very familiar tropes. Each monster is very uniquely its own thing. And the Muirdris, and what brief description we have and the effect it has on our hero, which I'll get into in a second, leads me to believe that it is in fact not just some conventional beastie with sharp teeth. It is actually this eldritch, Lovecraftian, chthonic horror that is just unspeakable, undescribable. And we can judge this because of the reaction that we have from our hero, King Angus. As soon as he lays eyes on this thing, he is so horrified, so absolutely just shocked and bowled over by whatever he is beholding, that the features on his face scramble and flee around to the backside of his head, so that he can't any longer have to look at this creature. And it's like they don't just like, it's not like his face moves as one to the backside of his head. It's like it gets scrambled. Like his eyes are on like the bottom of his neck, and like his nose is on the top of his head. Like he is so scared by this creature that his face scrambles, and he just flees out of there, and he gets back to dry land, and he's stuck this way. But by the logic of the mythology, he doesn't realize it. Even if he's walking around backwards now, he doesn't know what happened to him. And he gets back to his court, and all the people are of course horrified by what happened. And there is this customary law in ancient Ireland that a king who is must be kind of like a unmarred in body in order to be worthy to rule and whatnot. And so by the law, this guy would have to abdicate because he's now got his features all scrambled up. But he's such a good king that these people, they say, we can't let on what's happened to him. He doesn't know what's happened to him. He's obviously ignorant. So we got to break all the mirrors in the house. We got to treat him like nothing is wrong, because we want him to stay king. We can't have him abdicate. He's an awesome dude. And eventually after that, the story just trails off, and apparently he just stays that way for the rest of his days. He eventually gets back and kills the monster in vengeance, but it doesn't restore his face. And so pretty wacky stuff. And I use this as an example because the Muirdris is a creature with a stat block that I'm designing, and it will be able to impart this crazy effect upon your characters, where their faces will be scrambled to the backside of their heads, and that'll have its own statistical implications. But one of the things that I'm trying to get across here is that playing in this game will not just be a matter of knocking down hit points and having the highest damage ratios. Honestly, most of the stat blocks that you'll encounter, especially with otherworldly creatures, will often present these really unconventional challenges or consequences that are not necessarily like a direct threat to your character's hit points, but really kind of seed the game with all of these little role play cues and directions to take. It's much more interested in simulating this wacky mythology through the role play than it is just giving new combat experiences. Though, of course, that's not to say that combat is skimped on. It's honestly the best of all these worlds, really.
So Brian Smith says he got Picasso'd.
Yes.
And
Yeah,
two is like, is this monster going to kill my character? No, but it's going to make you look really weird, and everyone's going to make fun of you forever.
Yeah, pretty much. And that's honestly kind of a new experience for a lot of D&D settings. It's kind of it seems, or at least for 5th edition, it seems that's the creature stat blocks that you often encounter, they often just kind of amount to being a bag of hit points to smack down. So I was very interested in providing all of these really kind of left field experiences, so to speak.
So I kind of associate the Fae with Celtic
Oh yeah,
and
absolutely.
Irish folklore.
They
So
are here in great abundance.
yeah, that would be the follow up question. What was the most fun and interesting, or the creature you're most happy to bring into a D&D stat block?
Oh goodness. Well, I don't even know if I've gotten to my favorite ones yet because I'm going through a lot of them. By the end of it, we're hoping if you've had a look at our stretch goals on our Kickstarter, one of our stretch goals is that we want to hit a monster manual. And that's it's coming up. We might be able to achieve that by the very end if we're extremely lucky. Uh, but I'm having about 200 plus stat blocks designed so far. But I'd say my favorite one that I have designed so far is the mythological hero Cuchulainn himself. Not so much a monster, but well, he is actually kind of an absolute monster. Basically, I don't know how much you might know about the mythology of Cuchulainn, but he's basically the champion of Irish mythology. He's the Achilles. He's the Hercules. He's the big man on campus, you know, the monster slayer, the defeater of foes, taker of heads, all that stuff. And one of his like perhaps most superlative defining qualities is his he can Hulk out. He has a transformation berserk mode where he goes through this thing called the Revivified, the warp spasm, where he just absolutely warps into this hideous thing. They actually, I said earlier that Irish mythology is usually very sparing on its descriptions, but it's
Uh,
actually very rich and liberal in its description of the Reastrad. They say such things as all of the bones twist about inside of his body, his shins and legs go reverse, so his feet are pointing backwards. You can see his muscles writhing like snakes. One eye recedes back into the pit of his skull, making like an empty socket with just like this one little pinprick gleaming out. His other eye just like springs out rigid onto the end of its tendon stalk and just waves out like just like I don't you know his hair stands up on end and goes razor sharp, so if you throw an apple on it, it gets stuck, is the way they like to
they're
describe it.
really into the body mods.
They're really into the body horror in many
Yeah.
ways. Yeah, his jaw unhinges and his lip and his like lungs and liver flap out while he's breathing flames. He turns into an absolute monster, and this is because he's actually like the half demigod son of like the head of the pantheon, Lu. Isn't that weird? You expect demigod son like in Greek mythology to be all glorious and immaculate, and he is that when he's not fighting. When
Yeah.
he's a human, when like in his human mode, he's you know he's perfect, and as many Adonis-like heroes of mythology are. But what makes him so interesting is he has this other side to him, and the stat block that I have made for him really reflects that. Basically, in the absence of ancient red dragons, Cuchulainn is the end game challenge. Like he's going to be the CR20 or above. Still balancing him out and figuring it all out, but and it running him is going to be kind of a challenge for DMs. They're going to need index cards for Cuchulainn because he's got so many features going on. Uh, he's got obviously his warp spasm Hulk transformation. He's got this hot rod chariot with just spikes and spears and razor blades all over it, where if he runs you over with it, you become, in a mechanical term, grappled to the chariot, though really you're just pinned to it like a fly caught on a windshield. And you get dragged along with him around the battlefield while he's just tearing up your buddies. Oh man, it just goes on and on. He's an absolute maniac. Players, once they become familiar with his stat block, they will they'll if their players ever encounter Cuchulainn in the game setting, they would know to tread lightly around him. Though he's not necessarily an antagonist, he could be your buddy too.
Let's say that's a hero.
Yeah. Oh yeah. They get pretty wild. And yeah, and also that's actually also a reflection of what this setting is operating on. This is very interested in kind of authentically reflecting the the cultural landscape at the time. For instance, we've mechanically we've designed a mechanic where wondrous items are represented through head hunting. Head hunting was an actual big part of ancient Irish culture. A huge, warrior thing where they would collect their trophies and demonstrate their prowess by collecting the heads of their enemies. But
As you do.
there was also this belief that the soul resides in the head. And so collecting these heads was not only trophies for glory, they were also accumulating like this metaphysical, spiritual potency. And I've chosen to reflect that in a mechanical sense by as you collect trophy heads from your fallen foes, you roll a percentile die, and on a particular result, you discover that this particular head has a particularly exceptional soul and has left behind a trace of magic, which is now manifested by granting you the use of wondrous item-like powers, where basically you run around with up to 2 heads on your equipment slot, quote unquote, hanging from your belt, and they can get up to all sorts of crazy little functions for you. It's honestly probably the most extreme and gruesome aspect of the game, using actual trophy heads of your enemies as wondrous item effects. But that's just an example of where I'm trying to go with this game. And that's not to say I'm actually even trying to go with like, oh, this game is so brutal and ruthless and extreme and metal. But this is one aspect of the setting.
Brian Smith wants to know, is that where the Highlander came from?
It very well could be. I obviously I've seen the movie, and I'm no more convinced of Sean Connery being a Spaniard than anybody. But but yeah, honestly, now that I've never thought of it that way, but now that you mention it, the way that the quickening works, yeah, I could see that very easily having been an inspiration, especially given the backdrop of the Scottish Highlands and such, this whole Celtic aesthetic they're going on. Good thinking there.
Both me and Ted have definitely used heads in our games, either as NPCs or magic items.
Yeah,
Ted, like one of the players has a goblin head, a shrunken goblin head that is a magic focus that also can talk. We've dubbed him Bernie.
Nice.
So, and my brother loves putting a Bernie Sanders accent to him, which is hilarious as a goblin.
Oh, that's awesome! I love it.
And then in one of my campaigns, the players had killed a dark elf, and the brother showed up looking for revenge and had the other brother's animated head with him. So now they have the animated head and periodically torture it.
That's pretty cool. Yeah, and a lot of other people might be kind of familiar with the motif through obviously the most recent God of War game. We have one of the featured characters is just a severed head that you carry around on your belt, and he makes quips throughout the entire game. So it's out there as a motif, and this is kind of one of the original examples of that. You might say this is kind of one of the roots from authentic mythology where we have picked up that idea from. And that's what I want to do with a lot of this game, is show gamers kind of the genuine article, the original source of so many fantasy tropes that we kind of take for granted. For example, the biggest ones would be anybody who is deep into 5th edition at the very least, but obviously many other editions of D&D and broader gaming besides. We have the classes of like Bard and Druid, and for at least Forgotten Realms, we have the race of the Furbolg, who in Forgotten Realms are like these 8-foot tall, pink-nosed, blue-furred giantkin, and I love that depiction of them. I think Furbolg are great. They're really cool dudes. But what I'm doing here is I want to show bards and druids and furbolgs like in their original conception. Like these are the OG bards and druids and furbolgs.
Well, in earlier editions, the furbolg was, they look like big Vikings to me, the way they were depicted.
Yeah, and I could see why fifth edition kind of wanted to spice them up because
Yeah.
we were kind of being overwhelmed with all these variations of just like large sized giantkin when, just we already have hill giants and ogres and that basically does the trick.
Yeah.
But so yeah, earlier editions were very much more on board with like trying to depict the Furbolg originally, but I can understand why they did what they did with Furbolg in the fifth edition because when you take them out of their context, compared alongside so many other fantastic elements of D&D, they really do start to seem underwhelming. But when you find them in, I don't know, what you might call their natural environment, being this body of mythology, this setting, and you really get to appreciate the history and the mythology behind them and what they represent, they really do take on a whole new element. The way I love to describe the Furbolg, while we're on them as an example, is and they are one of among only three tribe choices currently. Tribe is the term we've chosen to use as opposed to race. And excuse me. Though stretch goals are quickly expanding that. We just unlocked a new tribe. But anyways, staying on the Furbolg, the way I love to describe them is anybody who's familiar with their Song of Ice and Fire lore would get it when I say that the Furbolg are like the first men to the Gales Andals, and the Gales are another tribe. The Gales, they honestly represent like the direct ancestors of many modern Irish people today. They are actually the Celtic culture that is recorded and attested to in history. And these other two tribes, the Aishi and the Furbolg, come to us through Gaelic mythology. But it's very much this thing where the Furbolg were just like these ancient first mortals upon Ireland. They laid down the foundations of civilization while striving against these ancient chaotic forces of nature. And they have these long epics and trials and tribulations long before even the Gaels get there. And it's an epic history that I lay out in like the first part of the player's guide. Like practically the first half of the player's guide is just a setting, introduction, and primer that goes into all this. And this is the actual mythology. If you read this, you're actually learning real world mythology, at least as I am, presenting it in a narrative format. But
So are Furbolgs still Giantkin?
no, they actually are just another human tribe of mortals. But it's much more than that as well. It's all about the culture, much more than like actual fantasy races in terms of like that's why we're calling them tribes, really, because the player options are far much more on kind of uh, common ground, you might say. They are all fairly recognizably human in their phenotype. Even the Aishi, who are ostensibly kind of the equivalent to the elves, they are these otherworldly people gifted in magic, kind of graceful and mysterious. They're the equivalent and would just be an elf in any other setting. But in this, aside from the consequences and just the circumstances of where their culture happens to be and where their history took them, they are essentially just another tribe of human beings. So that's the starting point for many player characters. I should say that if we unlock the next Kickstarter stretch goal, that will be changing. The next Kickstarter stretch goal unlocks 3 tribes that are far more. Let's say they would bring far more high fantasy flair and aesthetic to the people who want more colorful character choices. We got kind of like a beast man, beast folk kind of option in this new stretch goal. We have one that's kind of equivalent to the Azamar, another that's kind of equivalent to the Triton. A bit more out there and have their own magical qualities to them. But they would, if they get published in the book, they will be kind of set aside as quote unquote non-canon races, as they are built from these really generous interpretations of obscure folklore. So they're not necessarily for gaming groups that want to have a game with an authentic experience with an authentic mythology. But they'll very likely be, if we hit the stretch goal, be provided as an option for gaming groups that kind of want to get a little bit more Forgotten Realms with it, if you get my meaning.
More fantastical.
Right.
So what would you say, like what Irish myth mythological creature has D&D got the most wrong?
The most wrong. Well, it's difficult to say because honestly, there are actually not that many, like at the very least, Irish mythological creatures. Celtic in general. They don't very often. You don't find very many Celtic creatures in the monster manuals. Obviously, there's the Banshee, and actually, I would say that for fifth edition, the Banshee is actually a rather exceptional kind of stat block because it is one of the very few stat blocks in fifth edition that has a straight up save or die. Like if you hear this Banshee scream and you don't make the save, you're just dead, which is surprising in fifth edition. You don't find a lot of creatures like that. So I'll actually say that's a rather impressive representation. As far as poorly represented, I don't know if I can point to any particular creature, but I would say they have missed the poor job they've done in representation for Celtic creatures. That is just that they've missed a lot of opportunities and have left a lot of really cool creatures just on the cutting room floor if they were ever considered at all. Like I said, I'm accumulating a roster for a whole monster manual, and I already have like 60 plus otherworldly creatures, which is the category I'm having for all subtypes such as fae, monsters, spirits, and magical constructs. Like 60 plus. That's far more than I actually even expected to squeeze out of the source material. And I can guarantee most of these creatures are actually things that a lot of players have never even heard of. So yeah, I would actually say that my greatest disappointment has just been the sheer absence of enough Celtic inspired creatures in the monster manuals.
I think like Kobold Press has kind of dived into that well a bit
Yeah,
more than
yeah,
the
the Tome
official
of
stuff.
Beasts, the Tome of Beasts has really made a lot out of that for sure. And what's the other one? The something index? I forget the
Codex Creature
Creature
Codex.
Codex. Yeah.
Yeah,
Oh yeah, I've thumbed through those, and yeah, you certainly see a lot more of those. They definitely deserve honorable mention for that.
they're. I mean, at this point, I almost get overwhelmed with all the monsters in five
Right.
E.
Yeah. I just last night had my DM. One of my buddies was DMing last night. Had him throw something at us from the Creature Codex. It was the I don't even know how the designer came up with it or what they were thinking at the time, but it was this alligator with centipede legs and translucent skin. It was the most novel creature concept I've come across in a while. So that was straight from Kobold Press.
I mean,
They make a very good reference of actual real world mythology and also come up with some of their own very novel original stuff. So props to them.
it's no shark in a giant fishbowl, but
Right.
which is insane. So, do you usually find yourself as the player or as the GM?
It's a Our group is pretty weird. It's a case of musical chairs over there. We're
Uh,
kind of exceptional as far as I understand it, in that every single one of us actually takes turns DMing, and this is on a rotation that I don't even bother keeping track of anymore. I have friends who keep spreadsheets on their laptops for this, but it's like we meet twice a week, and every session is a different campaign, different DM, and we keep these all in rotation, and it's like a bi-weekly rotation where to get through every active game takes about 2 weeks with the 4 sessions. And I believe we currently have maybe 3 or 4 or 5 active campaigns, several more on the back burner where we're saying, hey, we ever going to get back to that? So
that sounds very familiar. The back burner part.
yeah, exactly. But we just can't seem to keep our focus on one consistent campaign at a time. I can't
Yeah.
tell you any single period of my game group's history where we have just had one active ongoing campaign that we stuck with from session to session. We just have to jump around, and so it's odd, but
It's difficult. I mean, for us, the
yeah,
thing that we found that like keeps that on track is like we'll say we're gonna run this particular game for a set number of sessions,
right,
and then like and then at the end we kind of like reevaluate. Is it,
right.
if the DM and players want to continue on, we continue on, or we'll do something different.
Sure. It's at this point, our group just doesn't know any other way. I think some of our players would start
Yeah.
to get jittery if we played
If
two
you if you
consecutive sessions of the same campaign.
if you introduce structure, it'd fall apart.
Exactly. Yeah.
They
This is
thrive on the
controlled chaos.
chaos.
Yeah. This is
Yeah.
controlled chaos right now, and it's just best that we keep the forward momentum.
Hey, I mean, you have a group to game with. That's always a plus
Oh yeah, it's I wouldn't
itself.
even call it it's not even I wouldn't even say it's like an unideal way of doing things, because we've grown accustomed to it. It's interesting for sure. But yeah, all of that is to say that actually one of the good I think one of the positive things about this is that it means that we all do get basically roughly equivalent time in the DM chair, and we are all really well practiced and creative and just honed creators in this discipline, really. So it's also a ruthless table to play to. Like feedback is very frequent. It's often very supportive, but we critique one another in a very scholastic way, I guess you could
Blunt.
say. Right.
So, do you guys play? Is it all D&D, or you guys play other games as well?
Fifth edition is definitely the main tent pole. It's what we always keep coming back to. It's always been D&D, whatever edition. Though of course there was actually a really long stint of Pathfinder in there. But no, we fairly commonly keep up with other systems. One of our group members is just an absolute rabid collector of various rule sets, and if not for that one group member, we probably wouldn't explore as much. But thank goodness to him, he actually pulls us out into unfamiliar territory all the time. He's saying, all right, I bought this new book, I didn't pay $50 for it for nothing, we're playing this. And with the rotation we keep, it's always pretty easy to slip in something new, at least for a one shot here and there. So
No, I
we've
like
actually,
that.
yeah, we've had a very, very broad experience where we try everything at least once,
What
actually.
was the last non D&D game you played?
Last non D&D game, well, both of these were contemporary with one another, given our weird rotations. They both occupied slots at the same time, but one of them was the I forget the publisher. I wish I could remember the publisher. It might have been Fantasy Flight, but I'm not sure. An Alien RPG, like off of the Alien movies.
Oh no, that's Free League.
Free League, right? Yeah, it's the F that threw me off.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
that was awesome. Much more of a survival horror kind of experience. In contemporary with that was actually something on the complete opposite spectrum. It was this game from Japan called Ryutama, which is commonly described as if Oregon Trail met Studio Ghibli,
Oh,
where combat is not really the point. It's more just kind of like this light-hearted romp where the idea is just your characters are going on this little journey, and it's all about the friends you make along the way. And it was a really stark contrast to this alien survival horror game we were playing in the same week.
nice.
But it was still a really charming system that I would recommend to anybody if they kind of want to take a vacation from dungeon crawling or whatever. But
Well, I often find like delving into other games helps me be a better player and GM in D&D anyway.
absolutely, yeah, I'm always trying to keep an eye out for lessons that I can kind of take back to my primary interest of the D&D rule sets and DMing that. I'm always picking up these little tricks from elsewhere if I can.
So, after the Heroes of Tara, where do you think you'll go next?
Oh man. Well, hopefully it'll be a while yet with Heroes of Tara. We're doing the player's guide now, but I've mentioned the monster manual a few times. If we don't hit that stretch goal, or even if we do, that'll be a little bit. That'll add some on the like a few more, maybe even a year of development and focusing on that. Then I would love to get a DM guide book as well for Heroes of Tara. I would really love to get the Holy Trinity of
Yeah.
books. But then after that, uh, maybe a new culture, a new mythology. I've been looking a lot into Russian folklore, Koshi the Deathless and Baba Yaga and all that. And they have these archetypal heroes called the Bogatyr, which are basically like the Russian equivalent to knights errant, and they provide a lot of really great, just kind of archetypes to follow for design and such. So that one's been on my mind a lot. But honestly, yeah, if I could make kind of a whole industry out of just giving this same treatment to every single culture in the world, that would be amazing, because I believe every culture and mythology does deserve the same treatment. I might have started with, Heroes of Tara, and I can't guarantee if I can give the same treatment to every mythology, because obviously it's just I've been building up a reservoir of familiarity with Irish mythology for years, long before I even started gaming. And with other mythologies, you have the issue of how much source material do you have to work with. We're actually really lucky with Irish mythology, where not a lot of people know this, but it's actually the largest surviving body of pre-Christian narratives in Northern Europe. It even outsizes the Icelandic Eddas, from which we get all of the Norse mythology. I don't know if the same can be said for every mythology and body of cultural work out there, but if I can, whatever I can do, I certainly would love to. Aside from that, I don't know, maybe something to do with interacting with or hunting cryptids. I really like Bigfoot.
Yeah. Have you played Monster of the Week?
I've not. No, I'm not familiar.
So it's a Powered by Apocalypse game. So it's like super
Ah,
simple.
oh yeah, I know
Um,
Apocalypse.
but like you could totally run that kind of game in Monster of the Week, or like Buffy the Vampire Slayer or Scooby Doo or Supernatural. Like any of those work like really really well for that.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah, Powered by Apocalypse is one of those big systems where, like I was saying, I just love to take little tips and tricks from. It's an
yeah,
amazing system.
for sure. So, how far along are you with the writing? How much more do you have left to do for Heroes of Tara?
Well, we're pretty close. We're getting there. I'm still filling in the final bits and kind of, sanding off the rough edges, and so to speak. Nothing's gone off to the editors yet, so we'll see what they cut off and what fat they trim before the end. But currently, we're at 240 pages, and it is a publicly available demo PDF that people can find through either our Discord page or right near the top with a link on our Kickstarter page. So I would definitely encourage people to go see for themselves how far along we are, and I'm sure they will be very impressed. It's pretty much taken on its full shape at this point. All the foundations are laid, all the mechanics are there. The thesis has been proven in full. Now it's just polishing it up, making it ready for the book.
You guys also fund it pretty quick.
We got our minimum goal of 10,000 within the first 24 hours, and I can't tell you like how astounded I am by that. Honestly, like looking forward, like Daniel, our productions manager, he does amazing work, and he's a big numbers guy. And one of the things that I think is great is he always tends to make estimates on the safe side of things. And before we started looking forward, we didn't even expect to be funded even by this point. So to do that within 24 hours just absolutely blows away and humbles me, and I can't express how grateful I am to all the enthusiastic support and the reception we've received so far. And we're not even slowing down. Like,
I mean, it's pretty impressive because you haven't done any projects before, so
yep,
you didn't have like
it's my first.
So you didn't have a base to draw on, right? And that's like the hardest part is like kind of getting the word out there, and
yeah,
and the first one is the hardest.
Yeah. We took our time to do our groundwork. We before we launched our Kickstarter, it was about 6 months of coordinated and focused promotion efforts. Actually, we actually took out of our own pockets and put ourselves in the hole a little bit, putting out Facebook advertisements and everything. And we're really glad it's paying off now.
I mean, to a certain extent, you just have to.
Yeah.
Otherwise it's like you can't feel the dreams. That's for sure. Like this idea, if you just make it, they will come. Doesn't really work that way.
Exactly. But I got to say that I would not have made it on my own. I kind of went into this when I first started. It was just me. I was just like posting on Facebook groups that I happen to be a member of, just like, hey guys, look what I made. Isn't it neat? I hope this gets on Kickstarter someday. And I was pretty naive. I didn't know exactly what it would take. I guess I was just assuming that I would take my best swing at it. I certainly wasn't looking forward to it because I am not by nature a social media competent kind of person. But then Daniel, he just caught wind of it, came to me and presented his pitch and convinced me that he was the one for the job. I hadn't even imagined the necessity for a promotions manager, but this project would be nowhere without Daniel Nimitz. And if anyone ever wants to consider him for contract work, I mean, he has my recommendation.
Nice. Well, we are up on the hour mark. Final thoughts before we head on out?
Well, it's just been a fantastic talk. I am incredibly grateful for you having me on and taking the time to talk with me. And thank you for your interest. Thank you to everybody who's been on the chat and to everybody else who's supported the Kickstarter. This is just the beginning. Heroes of Tara promises to be a rich and deep game setting that I hope that I can build upon for years to come to give people an authentic mythological gaming experience.
Well, thanks for coming on. I appreciate it. As always, folks, the links are down in the description. Go check out Heroes of Tara. And until next time, stay nerdy.